Welcome to I Have Some Questions. The show is all about asking questions our guests have never asked themselves before, never thought about, or been too afraid to explore. It's designed to uncover the human story at the root of successes and failures and help us as an audience learn and grow from that story. My hope is that you'll hear brilliant guests exploring new ideas and challenging themselves in new ways of thinking. I think this makes for great conversations. I'm going to bring on entrepreneurs, authors, coaches, scientists, and frankly, any vein of super interesting, successful, and passionate human I can find. I am fascinated by passionate people, and I have some questions for them. I'm Erik Berglund, and I hope you'll join me every week for new episodes. Welcome back to I Have Some Questions. I'm your host, Erik Berglund, and my guest today is Dr. Ian Beaty. He's a dynamic military leader, retention specialist, and entrepreneur. He's got over 2 decades of a distinguished service in the military. He's currently a major serving in the Oregon Army National Guard, but he began his career as an enlisted generator mechanic with the 7th Special Forces Group. He deployed to Colombia and Afghanistan during the early days of Operation Enduring Freedom. After commissioning as an infantry officer in 2011, he deployed again as a scout platoon leader, where he earned a combat infantry badge, and later commanded at the company level, leading his unit to achieve a state-leading record of 117% strength. He currently serves as the educational liaison for the Oregon National Guard. Ian bridges the gap between military service and civilian opportunity while fostering partnerships between educational institutions and military service. He holds a master's degree in organizational management and a doctorate in education with a focus on administration and leadership. And in 2025, earlier this year, he launched Maven Speaks, which is a speaking and training platform focused on retention, engagement, and leadership development for organizations seeking to build stronger, more engaged teams. He's based out of Beaverton, Oregon, and he balances professional roles by being a devoted girl dad to 2 daughters who are 2 and 7, and supporting his wife, Lacey, who serves as the mayor of Beaverton, which is home to Nike's global headquarters and nearly 100,000 residents. Ian is a fascinating combination because he has 20 years of military experience. He's led leaders through that group, and yet he also went and pursued degrees in organizational management and a doctorate in education, where he's really focused on leadership. So he's got a very unique combination of practical skill and educational theoretical understanding. He's put in the work to understand psychologically what it takes to be a great leader. And we have an awesome conversation about AI, about talent, about the responsibility of being a leader and why there's so many damn bad leaders out there. And I hope you'll take a listen and enjoy your time with it. You know, the current role that you're in, you went and created this thing out of an observation that there was a gap that needed to exist there. And so, you know, for the audience, it might be valuable for some backdrop, but I would love to hear more about the journey of creating this role and how that went. I suspect there's some interesting conversation there. Could you tell us about it?
Sure. So I'm in a very unique role and position, and I would argue I know I'm the only one in the state with my position, maybe even the country. But for me, you know, I've been in the Army and Army National Guard both for over 24 years. And years ago, I had the background as a recruiter. I was an enlisted recruiter, did that, ended up going to officer candidate school, got commissioned. And then years later, a decade plus later, came back as what's called the specialty branch recruiter. So I was the recruiter for all of your medical folks, doctors, lawyers, chaplains, nurses, anything to do in the medical field. And I was really good at it. I found the niche that I was able to do that. And then later was promoted into a recruiting commander role, so more of that administrative leadership role. And then fast forward a couple jobs later, I saw this gap when it came to recruiting, specifically for the Army National Guard, where the recruiters had great training. They went through their own school, which was 5 weeks of additional training, and they had the knowledge, they had the skills, but they weren't closing the contracts. They weren't getting enough prospects in front of them. And I was trying to figure out why that is. And looking at it from a sales process standpoint, it's just not enough volume. The simple sales funnel of they just didn't talk to enough people. And I thought, well, why is that? Well, the number one recruitable market is your 18 to 24-year-olds. And of course, we can go all the way up to age 40, I think. But 18 to 24 is kind of that sweet spot. And so where are those people? They're in school. They're in high school or college. And what I found was we didn't have relationships with those principals, superintendents, counselors, all of those key stakeholders at the schools to talk about not just recruiting, but different career alternatives in the military as a whole. And so I started going to principals and counselors and talking to them about, hey, can we partner to do something to accelerate this high school student or college student's path to career success? And if part of that is the National Guard, great. We'd love to talk about it. If not, that's okay too. And it worked. And we created these connections. And so I'm at over 20 years federal service now with the military, so I'm eligible to retire. But I thought, what's the highest and best use of my time? What can I do? And I found I had this golden ticket, I call it, where I do have my doctorate in education. And so what I learned in the education world is it doesn't matter if you're a colonel or a corporal, because most of them don't know the difference.
Yeah.
You could come in there and this recruiter is like, well, I'm at this rank. Well, it doesn't matter, because unless they had served or know somebody that does it, it's kind of meaningless. But when I come in and say, hey, Dr. Beaty would like to set a meeting with the principal, I can get a meeting. And so that's how I was able to bridge that gap. And then it dawned on me, that's what we need, is that liaison that could speak the education language as well as that military and recruiting language. And I thought, I'm the only person positioned to be able to do this. And so actually I pitched that to our adjutant general who works for our state governor. And I said, listen, I've got this idea. It's kind of crazy, but if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so I went into a meeting with him and I said, listen, I'm going to try to convince you in the next 17 minutes. And I picked 17 minutes because it's like that sweet TED Talk time, right? I did it on purpose. This is the next 17 minutes. I'm going to convince you to hire me for a job that doesn't exist, and you're going to create it. And here's why. And I outlined all the reasons, all the factors. And at the end of that pitch, he said, you know what? I think we should try it. And so a few months later, fast forward, they created this position. And now I'm the education liaison for the National Guard and work exclusively with college and high schools around the state to try to partner different things we can do. So it was a very unique way, different approach. And after learning that, the general's assistant actually said, hey, that was really cool that you did that. And most people would not lobby to get their own job.
I mean, that's such an awesome story, right? You saw an opportunity that you had a unique perspective on how to bridge, and you had success in it, and you went and asked for it and you got it, which is just a classic entrepreneurial approach inside of what most people would probably consider a highly bureaucratic organization, and you were able to do it successfully, which is pretty cool. The context gap is something that's jumping out at me, right? You identified that your average recruiter has absolutely zero understanding of the education world.
Right.
And yet that's the primary market they need to be spending their time in, right? And how could they, right? They went through whatever they went through to end up in that recruiting role, their own schools and military experience and their own jobs inside the military. None of them were educators. And so they really couldn't speak the right language to the gatekeeper that would actually bridge the gap of why it would be valuable to have them in, despite, all the training effort that they threw at them. So if you think back to the way the training programs run and the way you maybe led some of those training programs to teach a new recruiter how to walk into a school, what's like the biggest difference now? What would you say to them now that you didn't know how to say before of what's going to help them accelerate their success in those learning institutions?
That's a great question. The main thing I would answer that with is, how do I add value? That needs to be the question from the recruiter. And I'm sure that spans all industries, not just military recruiting, but recruiting through HR for other organizations. But what I've learned is, as a recruiter, most often they say, I have a goal, I have a quota, I have a number. Hey, counselor, I'm the recruiter. I'm here to talk to your students, which is all good and true. But it comes across way different when you walk in and say, hey, I'm a local recruiter here, but I like to add value. What can I do, and ask nothing in return? What can I do that maybe sets up a student with a tour of an industry partner here that we partner with as an electrician or carpenter or working at a hospital or something like that? Or what if I can do a personal finance class for you so that you can, hey, teacher, take that period, go do some more study and prep, take a break. I've got your class. I'll do personal finance. We're not even going to talk about the military. It's just adding that value. Yeah. And something like that, I found it gets a much better response because you're not asking for anything in return, and it may come later, it may not, but it's not so transactional. It's more community and relationship building.
Yeah, I mean, That is a classic humble servant sales methodology or mentality, right? And so it's no surprise that would be a way to think about it. But I've got to think that would run at odds with the quarterly quota or monthly quota dynamic within which these recruiters live, right? Their incentives, their structure, their job, their ego, their ability to deliver on what they're committed to would probably push against them having like the long game, because that is more of a long game, right? I'm going to serve until I earn the opportunity, which is what we all know, if you're experienced in sales, is the only way to really exist for a long time in any particular space. But it also, the short-term incentive nature is probably at odds with that. So like, how would you think about leading? How could you tell a guy to go and do that when in reality, he's got to get 6 applications in or whatever the number is in that same time? How would you position that for him?
Right. That's a great question. And I'm sure that question's more posed for that commander or leader of those recruiters. And so I don't want to answer that on their behalf or step on their toes by any means. But in my experience, it's the main differentiator from military recruiting and all other sales is commission versus no commission. Because if you're selling houses, selling cars, selling widgets, if you don't make the sale, you don't eat. And so there's this pressure on your back, either from an income perspective or your manager saying, hey, you're behind. The main difference in the military is your salary based on rank. And so it doesn't matter what you're doing. That's a really unique thing in the military. You could be, a cook or a mechanic or a police officer or what have you. It's all the same pay because it's based on your rank, not your job. But even as a recruiter, aside from a few, small bonuses, it's essentially the same pay. So even if you miss the mark, you miss your quota, you still get your paycheck. Yeah. And it's a plus and a detriment. It's a plus because you don't have that monkey on your back necessarily that you're not going to pay your rent. But it's a detriment because if you don't make it, it's like, where's the accountability, right? I got paid anyways.
Drive some motivation and ambition into some individuals.
Right. But I think that opens that door to be able to build those long-term relationships though. Yeah. And I would recommend to the brand new person, like, hey, maybe you don't sign up anybody your next 3 or 4 months. That's okay. We're not going to measure it against that. We're going to measure it against your funnel. How many meetings did you have?
Yeah.
Right? How many meaningful conversations did you have? Because I think that is a better indicator of where things are going than actual signed contracts. So if you can measure that and hold that as your accountability piece, I think it will help have people let their shoulders down and be more relaxed and add that value so they can build things long term so that they can talk to somebody 7, 8, 9 times to build that trust with them.
Yeah, man, that makes me think of a couple different things. Like I worked at Yahoo for a brief period for about 18 months. I sold digital display advertising for Yahoo back in like 2011, 2012. And in my short time there, I watched the short-term pressure of quarterly incentives, right? Publicly held company that was struggling at the time. Mm-hmm. And so we would do, in hindsight, a lot of stupid things in order to hit our quarterly number that we knew were going to dig us a deeper hole in the next quarter or next year or something along those lines, right? Short-term incentives that aren't going to build a long-term relationship with a potential client. And then I was only there for 18 months because I got recruited over to a privately held 100-year-old company, wildly different industry, construction sales, which is a lot longer sales cycle. Mm-hmm. And we regularly would take 18 months to close deals. And it just was, it's how you have to do it. And so that contrast of like privately held, quarterly focus, go win now, we'll cross tomorrow's bridge tomorrow, to like, well, no, we actually have to cross the bridge tomorrow. And so we're not interested in making it harder on ourselves. Let's do the right things long term. And that's what forced that process-based selling perspective on me, was like, how many people did we actually go develop new meaningful relationships with? And how many doors did we open we didn't have before, right? And each step that it takes to be successful in the process is really what our KPIs need to be, not just shipped revenue, right? We ship a physical widget. And so, but it's challenging to lead people through that, right? You could put yourself back in your commander of those recruiters' shoes potentially and be like, man, what would it take for an individual in that position? And again, to anybody, we're not suggesting anybody should go and do this, right? But it's just like, what would it take as a leader, the stones it would take to go, okay, here's what's up, team. For the next 3 months, none of you have to submit a single application, but here's what you have to do instead. I want 40 of these, 50 of each number that will lead to applications. Boy, that would take a lot of stones to go and drive that inside that culture, but it feels like that's the type of focus that would probably yield the greatest results.
I agree. Yeah, and I think the military it's unique, right? Because it's not private nor public, right? It's this like weird nonprofit government entity. But I think that's the big difference. You hit it on private versus public. I had one of my mentors years ago. He was a stockbroker, and then was big in multi-level sales. And through his stockbroker time, he told me, he said, people often ask the question to private companies like, when are you going to go public? When are you going to have your IPO? And his answer was, hopefully never.
Yeah, right. Please don't do that.
Right, hopefully never, because the reason is like, number one, you don't have the funding, and your business isn't good enough to do it on its own, so you need help from others. Or two, you just want an exit strategy and you don't plan to hold on to this, and you're going to go leave and go do something else.
Right.
Whereas the private company, typically, family owned, employee owned, they want to be around for the next 200 years. And so they're going to think more long term and more strategically. And they're not worried so much about the quarter. They're worried about the year and next year. And so I think that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, and it really gave me a great perspective. I loved the decade I spent at Victaulic because I was really able to see the way a very long-term company can cast a vision on the future and go towards it. Not a vision towards a year,
right,
but a vision towards 10 years. And again, in that particular industry, construction, you have to, because nothing happens very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the ability to identify, hey, this geography is going to be, data centers were one of the big expansion opportunities for us, right? And so we could literally look at a geography that had 0 data centers and be like, well, out in Boardman along the Columbia River, over the next 20 years, there's going to be dozens of massive data centers. How do we win in that market? And that might take years of investment in salaries and Amexes and travel and all the things before we ever see a dollar.
Right.
But it's really fun to be able to be long-term strategic like that. And I can't think of an institution that wants to survive another 200 years more than the military. So I've got to think some alignment is there in that direction. Hopefully what you're doing will help bridge that gap and create that perspective that, hey, maybe there's a way for us to take this long-term view and really focus on building out the processes and relationships that are going to yield that type of outcome long-term. That's cool. You went and created that.
Yeah, it's great.
So one of the things I've observed in my lifetime, and again, I don't remember how old you are, but I suspect we're pretty similar age, is like the perception of military service has evolved dramatically in our lifetime, right? From pre 9/11 and the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq to everything that's happened politically in the United States over the last 7-8 years to today. There's been a massive change in the perspective of the value of armed service in our country. And I would say from my perspective, and we don't have to go deep down this road particularly, but from my perspective, it feels like the outside view of military service has declined in my lifetime. The perception of the value, not only that it brings to an individual, but the value of American military power in the world. The perception is that is less than it used to be when maybe I was going through high school and was getting recruited for ROTC scholarships at the time for nuclear engineering. Like that was a thing, the conversation I was having a senior year of high school. And so I've got to think that the recruiting landscape has changed dramatically along those lines, right? The ability to say, look, the military gives you a great career, stability, skills, all sorts of things has probably evolved with it. But the pushback, I've got to think, has increased over time. Have you experienced that much? And if so, like, how do you take your current role where your job is really to build long-term relationships, maybe with people who don't view highly what the military offers? How do you bridge that gap despite your educational understanding? Like, how do you work with that? What conversations do you have to have there?
Yeah, I've seen that too. And so I was born in 1980. So I'm either the youngest Gen Xer or the oldest millennial. I'm not sure which.
Right. I'm 84, so I'm right there close enough with you.
Yeah. So I'm right on the bubble. Geriatric millennial, my wife says. But so for me, I joined the Army in 2001, but prior to 9/11, so April of 2001. And at the time, it was just kind of this nebulous, thing of like, it's the military, like we kind of do stuff, but nothing had really gone on and as far as a major conflict for a couple decades. It was pretty quiet. And then 9/11, of course, changed everything. And then through 20 years of the global war on terrorism, that was kind of the focus. And I saw from a American standpoint, if you recall, 2, 3, 4 years after 9/11, it's very patriotic, flags everywhere. It was kind of united. The political parties of the U.S. kind of came together And it was like, hey, let's be this unified country for the sake of our country. And then, like you said, I think it's slowly declined since about 2012, just kind of down, 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 down. And I've seen that in recruiting numbers, just kind of down, down, down. But there's a few things that changed along the way. Like one is just technology and the difference with Gen Z and being more prevalent on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram and in that world. Same thing with the younger folks and being able to reach them and talk to them. It's a lot different. Like if you go to a high school now, depending on where you are, but many high schools, if you look at students who are walking in between classes, they've got their headphones on, headphones, earbuds in their ear on their phone. And so they're almost unapproachable because they're in their own little digital world. But through that decline, it's been different. The other big shift about 5 years ago, so the military used to have this retirement system where if you did 20 years, this is active duty, National Guard, Reserve, any of those components, 20 years, then you could collect a retirement. Well, they shifted it about 5 years ago and went to it's called a blended retirement system. So it's basically like a 401k. So you could do 3, 4, 5, 6 years in the military now, take that 401k, leave, and go roll it over to a corporate account in some other job. And so the good thing is, as a young person, you could do a couple of years in the military, take that money with you, and you're not out. Yeah. Where it used to be all or nothing. You could do 19 years and leave, and you got nothing. Yeah. And so I think because of that shift too, a lot of people are leaving military earlier because they're seeing other opportunities in the corporate world. And so it's made a dynamic shift in the recruiting aspect.
Well, that military skill set is something that most organizations value tremendously. I mean, we at Victaulic had a specific program designed to develop relationships with the organizations who would refer, retiring military talent that wanted a career in what we did, and recruited heavily in that space because there's a cultural difference that comes from somebody who has spent 4, 8, 12, 20 years inside of the military. And when they continue to carry the ambition forward out of that, it's got a tremendous amount of value. I led several people who had that type of experience, and it was really effective. Why do you think that is? What is it about somebody who is career military to that point of retirement, who retires out in a good way and had a good career there, that makes them so valuable in the corporate or nonprofit or private sector?
I think two things. One, the perception of the trust. If you look at global rankings on the most trusted industries or trusted companies, like the Army tends to be towards the top all of the time as one of the most respected and trusted organizations when it comes to integrity, meeting legal thresholds and so forth. And so I think it just automatically comes with this perception of this person has integrity and they're not going to do wrong by the company. But the second thing I think is the leadership aspect. Regardless of your job in the military, from day one, everything's leadership training. The whole by design, the Army is a giant succession plan of if this person goes down, this person rises up and takes over. From the highest general to the lowest private, it's basically a giant succession pyramid, right? That's why it's made.
Sure.
Hey, like you're going to learn to lead people. You're going to learn to lead this team of 3. And after you're good at that, you're going to learn to lead this team of 10 and then this team of 20, and just goes up, up, up from there. And so transition that to civilian organization, any industry, public or private, you automatically have that built-in leadership factor. And so what you're doing doesn't matter. If you're able to influence and lead others, that's a huge soft skill that a lot of companies need, especially now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I would add to that the perception, at least I have from the outside, is if you're in the military, every day you carry a really high degree of responsibility, and you will be held accountable if you drop the ball. Yes. That just conditions somebody to be pretty highly accountable. Like every organization has its spectrum, right? So you've got your people who aren't very good in the military, just like you do in any company. But even that person who's not very good, who's towards the bottom end of the spectrum, if they're passing muster or whatever you would call it, if they're consistently moving forward in their career in the military and not washing out for some reason or the other, they probably carry a higher degree of daily, weekly, monthly, annual responsibility that they can't help but be far more responsible than the average individual in a company on the other side. And there's something about the clarity within which the military operates that I think probably elevates the degree of talent that those people bring to the table. Have you seen that as you like bridge out and start looking at other things external to the military? Have you seen that to be the case?
Yeah, I agree. And of course, like you said, not everybody is a rock star. And I used to tell people that when I was in command, we'd have people frustrated with somebody. Yeah. And I'm like, listen, not everybody's going to be a rock star. That's fine. But we need the whole team. But on the whole, yeah, I agree. When you go through all of the training through the military, regardless of your branch, it's just so much more on average than a civilian counterpart. Yeah. Because a lot of folks, especially your military officer and leaders, can say, yes, and they have a college degree. Yes, and they're physically fit. Yes, and they have all this other leadership training. Yes, and they can work under pressure in a high stakes environment. And so I think "and" is the key word. It's a lot of the things that a corporate person would have through their education experience, plus all of the military things as well.
Yeah, in the private world, you get very truncated leadership experiences. It's you're either an individual contributor or you're a leader.
Right.
You're really not. I mean, there are companies where you're both, right? Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, like it tends to be you're on one side of the fence or the other. And what I'm hearing you say is that the vast majority of people in the military, after X days or months or years, they're all to some degree leading other people. They're responsible for other humans. You use the term leadership as stewardship, that recognition that your job is to steward them forward in their career. You use that in the thing you sent me over. Mm-hmm. When did that really hit for you? Like, when did that moment strike that you recognized this leadership as stewardship perspective?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the key things is when it hit me when I had a bad leader. And there was this one incident where, under normal circumstances, it probably shouldn't have mattered, but I don't know why I got under my skin. But I had this platoon leader, and I was a sergeant at the time. Got this brand new platoon leader, new lieutenant, and we go out for a run, physical fitness. We go run a couple miles. And I remember at the time I had these bright yellow shoes. And we got back, and she pulled me aside and said, "You need to go change your shoes right now." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Well, those are faddish. You can't have those." And I said, and everything in the Army is regulation policy driven, right? And I said, "Okay, point to me in the regulation where it says you can't have yellow shoes." And she's like, "Well, I just know it's in there. Just go do it." And she was not going to have a conversation about it. It was, "I'm in charge of you. Just go do this." And it was in that moment I thought, wow, if you're a leader in this organization, because of the structure that's made that you're just supposed to carry out orders without question, assuming that they're not illegal or immoral, that yields a lot of power. And it could be for good or bad. And in the moment thinking like, why is this person so concerned about shoe color?
Yeah, right.
Right. When on the same time, like, what was our thing for that day? We were getting ready these grenade launchers to use for training, which is a pretty significant deal from a training and safety standpoint. And I'm thinking, okay, how does shoe color come in the conversation with grenade launchers?
Yeah.
And so in that moment, I thought, okay, I could do better than that. I could be a better officer, leader than that. I don't know how, I don't know what I'm doing, but it was in that moment I decided I'm going to go to officer candidate school. I'm going to become an officer. I'm going to study leadership, and I'm going to make this thing better.
Did you change your shoes?
I don't think I did. I was kind of a rebel.
Okay. That has to be it. So I wasn't in the military, right? If you don't change your shoes in that moment, but to your point, there's no code or regulation or whatever, like, do you get in trouble for that? Is there punishment? Is there a punitive element to not obeying something that actually isn't in code? I've got to think there is. It's humans.
Yeah, right. Right. And it's unique too. Like if you talk about the National Guard where, weekend warrior, 1 weekend a month, typically, sure. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Like have to do push-ups for the next 3 hours and then I go home?
Good point. How long is my consequence?
Right. What does this look like? Which is different than, active duty where you're on some base or fort somewhere full time. But yeah, it's from that, I learned that leaders have a lot of influence, when it comes to retaining people, building good culture, building teams, having people follow you because you're you, not because of your position, not because of your rank. Why would somebody follow you? And that's what I took away from that.
You use that term, you're a bit of a rebel. What role do you think the rebel attitude plays in organizations and leadership?
I think it's helpful to a degree. I mean, you don't want to be distracting or, tear things apart, but I think it's good to have that cynic or skeptic in the room, that especially that has an outside perspective, especially like you talked about in that corporate world where you're trying to go month to month, quarter to quarter, and it's all about profit. And everybody, you get the groupthink mentality. Everybody's thinking along the same way. And all it takes is that one disruptor, that one rebel in the room that says, hey, wait a minute. Did you ever consider this? Did you look at it this angle? And if you have a good leader, I think they'll take that into consideration and say, you know what, you're right. Whereas if you have that more, autocratic, authoritative type leader, they're just going to say, go shut up and sit in the corner and do what I say.
Yeah, I think it plays a healthy role, and I think to some degree, a good leader is often fairly rebellious. And that doesn't necessarily mean vertically, though that would play out as well. Like I like the definition of leadership that to lead is to influence somebody towards an advantage. And influencing somebody means you are the proximal cause of change. That means you get them to do something they wouldn't have done otherwise. And towards advantage is why it's important and it needs to be good for them in the organization. But like to say it another way, if you're not being disruptive, I don't think you're often leading very effectively. So there's this element where I think you have to challenge quite often if you're genuinely dialed into what you're doing and you care about it, you have conviction and courage and motivation to go do well at it. It's kind of impossible not to. If you're always following orders to the T, you probably have a pretty low ceiling.
Yeah, and I love you said it's not always vertical. And years ago, I read the John Maxwell book called The 360-Degree Leader. And in that book, he talks about leading across, leading down, leading up. Like you don't have to be in a position of authority or have a title to be a leader because leadership's influence, right? Yeah. And you could lead your peers, which is, I would argue, harder than leading subordinates. Because,
absolutely.
Right? Because you don't necessarily have power or authority over them. But when you're leading your peers, in the workplace or not, you're trying to convince somebody to do something, which is real leadership. And a lot of times, like with younger military folks who are not quite in a leadership position yet, I'll ask them and say, hey, like, how many of you are leaders? And a lot of them don't answer, raise their hand or answer. And I say, well, think about this. Like, how many of you convince your friends to go to a Blazer game or go to a college football game or go to a concert or something? And not only do you convince them, like, you're the ringleader, and you say, hey, I'll put it on my credit card. Like, you just pay me back. Venmo me back. I'll set everything up. And a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, that's me. I do that. Like, that's leadership.
Yeah.
Like, it's a simple example, but you're convincing somebody to go do something with you that they don't have to. You're not twisting their arm, but you're leading them along.
Yeah, influencing them towards that advantage, that thing that does sound fun or interesting, intriguing, good for me, enjoyable, whatever it may be.
Right. And the military does a really good job, I think, at finding those natural leaders and developing in that way, because in a lot of schools, a lot of like your infantry school, ranger school, and more, et cetera, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll bring like multiple ranks of people together. And in that training moment, a lot of these folks have never met each other before. They take their rank off before they arrive on purpose. Well, now it's kind of level playing field, right? It doesn't matter. You could be 7 ranks above somebody, but in that moment, in that situation, you don't know because all you see is your name tape and no rank. And so then the real natural leadership emerges of that person saying, hey, I'm going to delegate. I'm going to bring teams together. Hey, I'm going to start tasking. You go do this. And then through that leadership process evolves and develops without, I mean, could you imagine in a corporate world, you walk in, like there's no president, vice president, CEO, right. Like strip all those away, right? You just walk into a boardroom, you don't know each other. Like, what do you do? Like, that's the kind of environment it is sometimes.
Yeah, what kind of cream flows to the top, right? And how focused can we be on whatever the North Star of the objective or mission or goal is when we lose or abandon probably that hierarchical dynamic that tends to limit us. Why is it so easy? Like, I don't know a single person who doesn't have a story about a bad boss. Like right. everybody's got the person who told them they needed to change their yellow shoes for God knows whatever reason, right? And most people have multiple stories of that. And to some degree, there's a perception gap. You don't know what your boss knows and why certain things matter. In the military, It might come back to code, but almost no other organization has that type of alignment within which decisions are made. Like most of the time, it's a lot more Wild West in what decisions are made and how we go about it. There isn't usually a good framework unless they're really aligned on their mission, vision, and values. There really isn't a good framework for why a person wouldn't arbitrarily make you change your Nikes or whatever it might be.
Right.
But why the hell is it so common for bad leadership? And we've probably both been bad leaders at moments too. So let's throw a caveat in here to say, like, talking about this does not exclude our own previous leadership and potential future leadership. But why is it so easy to be a bad leader?
Yeah. In parentheses, I have been a bad leader.
Yeah, 100%. I'm part of this problem.
Learn from my mistakes. I think I have learned through my academic research and my doctorate degree, combined with my 24 years in the military, I came to the same conclusion. It's lack of training. Number one, lack of training. And I spent 3 years, my doctorate program, to have this fancy degree and title and thousands of pages of literature, research, and writing, just to say people don't quit their job, they quit their boss. And why is that? What I've learned across industries, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's the same pattern. What happens is companies promote their best and brightest to manager positions. Take, for example, a coffee shop. Let's say you're the best barista. You're an amazing coffee maker, and you show up on time. You're good with the cash register. You're good with people. You don't mess up the coffee stuff. Like, hey, barista, now you're going to be a manager. You're going to be a shift leader, and you're in charge of 7 people on your shift. Ready, go. That's a disservice to that person. Why? They don't offer training. Almost 99% of the time I've seen, the organization doesn't say, we are going to specifically train you on how to be this barista shift leader, and here's the different skills you need. Because managing people or leading people is way different than managing a coffee machine. And so now you have the dynamic of people, of like, what happens when that employee comes to you literally crying on your shoulder because they just had an issue at home, or somebody shows up late or no shows, or messes something up, or gets into a fight with a customer while in this coffee shop. Right? Those are all way different skills. And what I've learned is if organizations could pause and say, yes, we're going to promote you, and we're going to offer this 10, 20, 40 hour, whatever it needs to be, training seminar on how to prep you on how to be this manager position. And that's all the way from the bottom up to the CEO. But that doesn't happen. And because of that, you get a bad manager, bad leader, because they weren't taught. They didn't know what they were doing. They're just floundering on their own. And then their subordinates, those people they're leading, they get frustrated. They go, my boss is terrible. And it goes back to people don't quit their job. They quit their boss. And they say, hey, I'm going to go across the street to this other place who pays the same or more, and I have a better boss.
Yeah, I don't think we're very good at identifying leadership potential. And we have this built-in belief that success in one arena will naturally translate to success in a different arena.
Absolutely.
What do you mean you're not a good leader? You were a barista.
Right.
You know how to be a barista. You know how to do their job. Why can't you make them be good at their jobs? That's because those are wild, those are barely overlapping Venn diagrams is what they are. And so I would add to your diagnostic that, yes, most organizations do not have it in their DNA to train leaders because they don't have they don't have that leadership trail to transfer. You can't give what you don't have. Most organizations don't have a depth of understanding of leadership itself, let alone training the mechanism to train it. But also, I think there's an element of misidentification of potential. Like, I think most people wildly overestimate someone else's potential and ambition because of success in one arena. Why is that person such a good barista? There's a bunch of reasons a person will be a rock star performer at a particular function. Right? Maybe it's monetary motivation. Maybe it's they really want to bring home the money for their family. Maybe it's they can't stand their family, and so they love being at work and they get really good at it. Maybe it's because their mom made them make them coffee every morning and they hate doing it, but they're really good at it. They don't know anything else. Like, there's all of these human dynamics at play. And without an effort to understand those dynamics and really try to figure out where someone's going and where they want to be and what skills they want to get better at and what they want to live through more, we see so many bad promotions of good people, by the way. Those people are very capable of great things. Yeah. They're just probably not at that point in their life being in that leadership responsibility.
And they could even be a capable, great leader. It's just...
You got to help them.
Right?
Help them get there.
Just because they have the capability, if you don't bring that out in them and show them, it may not naturally emerge.
How does the military differentiate in that, right? You've made the comment, and I've heard from plenty of others, right? You climb rank based on seniority and experience, and there's probably some degree of testing and things that happen at higher levels to really transition. But But how does the military prevent the wrong leaders from entering that role? And I know they don't do it perfectly, but I've got to think 100 years of 200 years, 300 years of tradition of doing this has given them maybe better DNA in their ability to identify who they really want commanding the armed forces in high pressure situations and those that they really don't ever want to be in that role.
Yeah.
Do you know how does the military do that?
I think the biggest difference, at least for the Army, and I can't speak to other branches, but I assume they'd be the same or similar. But I think the biggest difference is every time you're promoted, there's a training course that correlates to that. And you're right, they don't get it perfect, and sometimes people are promoted, maybe they shouldn't have been. But on the whole, we do a pretty good job of administratively looking at, do they have the background, do they have the education, do they have the experience, how are they ranked compared to their peers, et cetera. And then all that dust settles, they'll say, okay, you're at the top of the list, you're promoted. But it's not just you're promoted, ready, go. It's you're promoted and you have to go to this course, which is 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 weeks long. Some folks, like on active duty Army, they might go to a course for a year long, just leadership training course. It says, okay, you're going from like a captain to a major. You're going from, this company grade to a field grade staff position. And in so doing, you're going to go to this course for 10, 11, 12 months to learn all the facets about that and the leadership thing to prepare you to lead at the higher level. And it might be 2 weeks, it might be a year, but the point remains, there's additional training with that. And I don't see that in corporations. It's just, hey, barista, you're promoted. Started next Monday, ready, go.
Yeah. So how does it's not just training. You have to do the training well. There's a mechanistic element that this works, right? If you just make a barista watch a bunch of videos about how they're supposed to be a good leader, that's probably not going to translate.
Yeah.
It might be better than nothing, to be very fair, but it's probably not going to translate to real world performance that well.
Yep.
What does the military do? And I'm sure it varies training by training, but is there some element of dry running in those trainings where it's like, you're actually going to practice doing the thing, not just talk about doing the thing ad nauseum?
Yes, there's both. There's the academic side, which there's a lot of research and writing papers, as well as giving oral presentations to your peers. So you might have to do like a PowerPoint presentation in this training to your peers of, here's my plan, here's how I would tackle this problem. And then you might have to talk about it with both your instructor, your peers on, here's the problem, here's how I'd handle it, what do we do next? And then they might even go the final step of role playing through it. And okay, like you're gonna sit down with this problem, this personnel problem. Let's talk through this both on paper, written, and verbally, and walk the dog on this, as we say. Walk the dog to the end and say, like, what is the outcome of this? And is it perfect? Absolutely not. And you don't always get it right because humans are imperfect, but I think because of that extra process, that's the main difference of that leadership piece with the military.
And that's probably a huge difference. That's probably, again, going back to it, one of the reasons why leaders who retire out of the military are so sought after in the private world, because that degree of exposure and that familiarity with the dry running or walking the dog, role playing, practicing a skill before you go execute it is just not common in the corporate or nonprofit world. And it's one of the things that makes me so excited for the future is, we've launched this AI role play company and we're very passionate about getting people to practice the different soft skills. They've never had a mechanism to train before, but that gap is enormous. And I genuinely do think like we can all look around and say, we've all had bad bosses and that just happens. That's never going to go down to zero.
Mm-hmm.
I think the two things we've talked about, just freaking train them, and don't just train them, but train them and give them a chance to practice the things with zero consequence and tight feedback. And we probably eliminate the vast majority of this problem.
Yeah. I think, and with the AI role playing, I think that's phenomenal. And I know that that's going to be something in the near future that's going to be used a lot, because I think I've heard you say before, like, time doesn't make you good at what you're doing. It's reps. It's the number of times. Matter of fact, I was just talking to a professional speaker yesterday, and he was talking about, if you become a professional speaker, like how much time do you need? Well, it's not about time. It's about reps. And he was saying like most professional speakers try to do 50 gigs per year to get good. And then in 10 years, they get good. And he was saying, years ago, the famous Tony Robbins was saying, well, I'm going to find a way to do 500 gigs this year. Right. I'm going to get a 10x return, and I'm going to get a decade of experience in 1 year. because it's not about time, it's about reps. And so for the AI model, I think that's awesome that we could use across industries to help people in a non-threatening, low stakes environment to get that training they need.
And so why is there so much resistance to that? I mean, the AI role play thing is new. So I don't mean pushback against AI role play, though that exists too. But I mean more like the recognition that practice is what it takes. Like, we know this to be unarguably true. Like you said before, like combat forces absolute clarity. And so you can see it probably in I've got to think the wargaming exercises that are done for soldiers to go practice the operation they're going to go and do is very intensive, tight feedback in each piece of the puzzle because the consequence is so high. And we see the same thing in sports.
Yes.
It's just so easy to observe, like, holy cow, those guys have practiced that an enormous number of times. They executed it so cleanly, and that takes leadership and coaching and feedback and all the things. Yeah. We know this to be true in anything with physical consequence. Why do we utterly forget about it when we're in this business world where we're kind of divorced from the physical sensation of failure so much?
I think because people don't like to practice. And I was going to go right back to what you said with the sports, right? Yeah. You look at like John Wooden, UCLA basketball, one of the winningest coaches in history. And he's asked over and over, like, why are you so good? Like, you guys just do like the basic fundamentals. You don't do anything spectacular. And he said, because we love practice. Every practice is 100% effort, knowing that, perfect practice makes perfect. And so when it comes to the game, it's going to churn out. And I think it's the same thing, whether it's military, sports, or industry, that if you get enough reps and enough practice, you'll get good at it. But to your question, people don't like to practice. They don't like the role play. They don't like that feeling of this isn't real. And I think they want to just go do it. But then when they either one, don't do it, not often enough, or they don't do it well. And so I think that needs to be a huge culture shift across companies of, let's go practice. Let's get these reps in and get it right so that we're in front of that prospect or customer or whomever. We're doing it the right way.
Yeah. I mean, in the corporate world, we jump immediately to, okay, how am I going to incentivize people to practice? What do I need to be able to do that? Right. Which is like, it's just that's what's built into the culture right now, especially like both of us with kind of a commercialization sales-ish background where the wiring is that way. It might be different for accountants, but at the end of the day, if I'm going to ask the accountant to do something extra, I feel like I have to do something extra, but it could just be something that's just part of the job. Right. I was talking to there's an entrepreneur I was at a poker game with recently, and we were having a conversation afterwards, and he builds a really interesting interface for sales development platforms and sales enablement platforms. So he was working with Sandler, I think it was, maybe to develop an interface that would give them a one-pager on the prospect they were about to call. And he was like, how do you get your salespeople to practice? And my answer was, well, it's very simple. The button he wants to push on the screen is to call the person he wants to call. But that button's grayed out until he's done 3 practice sessions with the virtual version of that person. He's just not allowed to do it.
So you have to practice.
You can build in the mechanisms by which a person isn't allowed to go and audit a set of books until they run this practice audit first. Whatever the thing is, you can do that, but it takes some kind of stones. It takes some disruption. It takes some rebellious nature of somebody to buck they'll do it fine, and to have the courage and conviction to force that type of change. Have you ever lived through something like that? Can you think back to any leader in your life who was like really disruptive in a way that was like unorthodox, but like necessary? Have you ever seen that happen in real life?
Yeah, I've had a few. Matter of fact, I had this one, team leader. He was a sergeant, and he was the naysayer every time, but he did it with good points, good value. He always looked at everything from the other side of the coin. And because of that, because he challenged and pushed back on leaders, including me, made me a better leader. Because I would say like, hey, we're going to do this mission and we're going to go do this thing. And he would say, no, he would just say straight up, that's dumb. Like, elaborate, tell me more. Yeah. And he would show me and say, well, if we do this, this might happen, and you kind of put these pieces together like, oh, okay, well, maybe this isn't a perfect plan. Like maybe we go back to the drawing board, look at this. But because of that disruption piece, I think it was a big benefit. Now, it could have been a different leader who didn't take that approach and maybe just told them, go shut up and sit in the corner and be quiet. But to me, it was very valuable.
Yeah, you kind of have to have those people who create friction in order to grow. I had two guys on my team named Jake and Mike who are awesome human beings. One of them was ex-Army helicopter pilot, actually. That's what he had retired out and come and worked for us. And they told me one year, these were my two senior guys on my team in Oregon. And midway through the year, like we had just butted heads all year long. Like, it's like, what the hell is going on? Like, why is it so hard to lead these guys this year? And midway through the year, we were finally having a beer or something together. And they're like, yeah, we never told you, but we decided this was the year of no. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, we just decided that any corporate initiative we were going to push back on. Not indefinitely.
Just automatically?
But we were just going to start from a position of no and see what happened.
Right.
And boy, did they. And we got much better that year. Like in hindsight, like it sucked. But in hindsight, I looked back at it and was like, wow, we didn't do a lot of things that really would have wasted our time. And we really, because they said no, we were forced into conversations to really whittle down the wood that was unnecessary to get to the thing that really mattered. So we'd focus on the right objective in the first place. And when I had a plan of how to do it and I came up with it from my ivory tower instead of being in front and center with their customers, we landed at better solutions. And like, it really was effective. Now, I would have preferred an advanced heads up and maybe we're going to try this out so so it wouldn't have been 6-7 months of frustration. But like,
right.
I think if you don't have that resistance built in somewhere, then it becomes too easy to skate and to not force the practice or force the hard things that are necessary. So that guy saying no to everything and calling stuff dumb, you had the humility to appreciate it and see what it was.
Right.
It's easy to do, but there's value in that.
I like going back to your question of, do you need to incentivize somebody to practice? I don't know. If you look at sports, like, do you need to incentivize them? No, it's just a known quantity that you're going to do X amount of practices before your game. Like, you don't have to say, well, you get this special prize or something for coming to practice. That's just what it is. So maybe that's just a shift in the culture of the corporate world. It's just saying, okay, like this is the new norm. We're doing, like you said, 3 reps before the call or whatever that is, and just building that in. Because to change the culture, what happens if you make a change and then as people naturally cycle out and you hire new people and they come in, eventually 100% of the people will not know anything different. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way the culture is. But you've got to have, like, going back to our original piece, you got to have that long-term vision. You can't think of it in a 30-day chunk. You got to think, how do we make next year better?
Which is really difficult to have inside of most companies, right? Not just the contextual advantage where you can be long in that way and have the cash flow or the business structure that allows you to do so, but also to have the political capital, the will, the courage, the stones, the whatever, the chutzpah to be like, no, this is the right thing. The conviction of like, we're going to go do it this way because it's what's going to be right. It's really hard to have that in those organizations. That's where it kind of goes back to that rebellious. Like, you got to be willing to be disruptive if you think it's an advantage that you're working towards there.
Right.
It also, going back to, I was thinking of something as you were talking, that why is it so easy to be a bad leader? Well, there's also this pressure. If we go to like the individual who gets promoted, we've talked a lot about the people who do the promoting, right? And we're bad at identifying potential, and we don't necessarily know if that's what the person wants. And we're not very good at training them when they actually do take on that job. So there's a bunch at the leader doing the promoting, but there's a lot of pressure on the person being promoted too. Like, there's absolutely a feeling, we've both lived it, of, hey, you have this title now, and you stand up a little straighter and you're like, well, shit, I guess I'm supposed to know how to do stuff.
Right.
I kind of naturally think, because I was given a new job and title and pay or whatever, I have an elevated ability to go and do something I've never done before. It's this very weird human arrogance moment that I think we all have to wrestle with for a while. And usually the balloon gets deflated by somebody. But did you live through that at all, where you had that feeling initially of like, okay, I got this. I guess I got to go come up with all the answers? Oh,
yeah. It's like, okay, you're promoted. And then you go to sleep. You think, well, when I wake up tomorrow, I'll have this new skill set, right? Yeah. Like, somebody entrusted me for this new position. I have the promotion. Like, therefore, tomorrow morning, I will wake up with 27 new skills. That's just not the case. Yeah. And I've learned it makes it even harder, because now people, like you said, are looking to you of like, hey boss, you got all the answers, right? Like, well, no. Like, either one, I got to pretend, or two, just being transparent and communicating with people like, I don't know everything. Help me out on this.
Which takes a tremendous amount of courage and humility and character to really be willing to look at someone you're now their boss and say, I actually don't know how to do that.
Right.
What do you think you would do? How would you navigate the situation? Are you living this every single day? I don't anymore. What do you recommend? There's this equal parts humility and courage and responsibility that it takes to have that type of conversation without feeling like you have to succumb to whatever the team tells you need to do and be kind of, the tail wagging the dog or the puppets, driving the marionette.
Right.
Versus the authoritarian, we're going to do it my way or the highway. Like it's hard to strike that balance. That goes back to one of those things that needs to be trained, right? You can find that balance over iterations or time, as some people would say, but that's not very natural for somebody to have that on their own.
Yeah. To me, the biggest thing is newly promoted leaders who are not comfortable in that position. Like anytime you have to tell somebody your rank in a conversation, right? Like, do you realize I'm at this rank or title of vice president, whatever it is?
You already lost.
You already lost them, right? They already know that. And if you're trying to remind somebody of your rank or title, that's not the way to go. And obviously you're not comfortable in that. But I think the difference is promotion blocking, right? Your peers and subordinates of saying, well, I'm in charge, therefore do this. Like if you flip that on its head and say, if you have kids, if you're a parent, right? As a parent, what do you try to do for your kids? Make them do better than you. Like one of my mentors was pretty wealthy, multimillionaire. And he said, when I have kids, he's like, yeah, I'm going to give them a house and a car. And a lot of the people I talk to are like, well, that's spoiling them. How could you do that? Why would you give your kid a house? That's crazy. He said, listen, they can either start in the gutter like I did and start at zero and build everything up from scratch like I did, or they can stand on my shoulders and pick up where I left off.
Yeah.
And if my kid doesn't have to worry about paying for a schoolhouse or car, imagine the possibilities of the good they can do in the world. They might be the next billionaire who's, solves some virus problem because they didn't have to worry about a house payment. And I'm going to let them surpass everything I've done. And you take that in the corporate world, why not have that parental approach of, hey, employee, I'm 15 years ahead of you. I'm going to do everything I can for you to surpass me and do better. But a lot of people I don't think have that approach. They have I'm going to put my thumb on you. You do what I say, and I don't want my position to go away. And therefore, I'm in charge and I'm going to remain in charge.
Yeah. I think there's a balancing act there, right? Let's use that parenting example, right? There's that saying of I want to give my kids enough to do something, but not enough to do nothing.
Right.
Dynamic, right? Because on the one hand, giving your kid that advanced heads up in whatever form it is, right? House, car, whatever it might be, is how freaking cool. I want that. I got 2 little girls. I know you do as well. We want things to be better and easier for them. And yet we have to acknowledge the nature of humanity and that if things are easy, we don't value them very much.
Right.
And so there's value in the struggle of having to make rent and having to figure out a down payment and oh shit, I got a low credit score because I didn't pay that credit card. There's value in
learning lessons. Yeah.
We just want to curtail the depth of the consequence, right? I want to take as much of the sting out as I can without robbing it of the value of the lesson. But I don't know if a house car is the right thing or not. I think there's a really weird balance point there. And that translates over to the leadership side in the corporate or professional world as well, right? I love the idea of asking people, hey, what do you need for me to be successful? You've shared that with me before too, which is a really valuable thing, but the pressure has to be on them to be successful, not on me to do the thing.
Right.
There has to be a buy-in from them to say, well, here's all the stuff that I'm going to do. This is my component of making me be successful. And on top of that, this would be the thing that would be really beneficial. But if it's just, I need you to do most of it so that I don't have to do as much, that's what I find a lot of leaders trap themselves with when they take that attitude of, I want to give my people a heads up. I used to have the attitude that my job was to remove boulders and blockades from my people's paths of success, which most leaders, I think, especially if you come from anywhere near a bureaucratic organization, okay, that is a part of my job.
Right.
I obviously have to do that, but I overemphasized it. I thought that was my primary job. And I came to realize, my primary job is really to develop the talent of the people that I've been entrusted with and to make sure that we're accountable to the mission that we've been handed and entrusted to hit. Those are the 2 things I really have to do. Now, one of the ways I can do that is remove the occasional boulder, but it's usually more important to help my people recognize, hey, you're on a stupid road. There's a bunch of boulders down that path. Don't do that. Or to help them realize how to move their own boulders, because they're quite capable and they probably want to get it promoted and need that skill as well. I think being overly helpful, I guess too long didn't read version of that. I think being overly helpful to our children, to our bosses, or excuse me, to our subordinates in our organizations has the risk of being pretty detrimental to them. And I suspect, based on what I do globally, there's a lot of leaders who are way too helpful right now to their own detriment. Have you seen that too?
Yeah, I've seen that, especially where, in administrative jobs we have, where bring in somebody who is full-time but temporary, right? We know it's going to be a 3-month or 6-month thing. It's a temporary position. We've got some data backlog that we need to fix type situation. And you bring in somebody. And I've seen this multiple times where you have this leader that says, oh, well, I gave this task to this person. They didn't do, I'll just do it myself. Why? Because I don't want to invest the time to teach them. It's going to take me so much time to teach them how to do this thing. It's just faster to do it on my own. Yeah. Which in the moment, yeah, that's true. But you look long term, even over 3 months, that's not the way to go. And because of that, you're hindering that new person to grow and learn those skills and develop. But I see that over and over again of let me just do it for you because it's faster and easier.
Yeah. And so that's the internal motivation of like the fast and easy, and I want to add to people the motivation of this person's been entrusted me to develop them, and it will probably help their career and their next role if they learn how to do this type of thing here and move forward. Now that's hard because I'm not tied to their next role and I don't have any incentive for that. But that's one of the things that I think there are very few things that are more intrinsically satisfying to almost every human than to contribute in a meaningful way to another person and watch them thrive and succeed. Now, even the smallest, grinchiest heart beats when that type of event happens and they're responsible for it. So I think there's this connection of like humanity and leadership as a servant that is deeply rooted in us, and helping people unlock that and recognize like, sure, it is faster and easier and it's less strategic for you for these reasons. But maybe more importantly to humanity, your humanity is like, you're going to feel really freaking good when you help that person learn how to do that, and the next job they crush it, even if they never tell you about it.
Yeah. And especially when you're talking about next job and next thing and what are you doing? One thing I learned from my wife, my wife's a mayor of a large city. And before that, she's in C-suites in healthcare, and she's interviewed hundreds of people. And so I've talked to her over the years and like interviewing techniques, and that you interview so many people, and at first you're probably not good at it and you're hiring the wrong people, and it takes you a while to figure out to ask those right questions and see through the BS and get the right person. But through all that, she told me like one of the most effective interview questions you could ask right now is, what is your job after this one going to be? And the reason is when you ask the question, I think it was on your earlier podcast, I heard the question of, how long do you want to be in this company? And it's always, the staged answer of, I want to promote management and stay here and have a, long, healthy career here. And that's probably not true. So by asking the question, what's your job after this going to be? You automatically do two things. One, they're going to give you that BS answer of, I just want to stay here and promote. And if they're, Gen Z or younger millennial, we know that's not true, because Absolutely. You got to go lateral to go vertical for promotions now. But two, if that person answers honestly of, hey, I see myself here for 2 years and I want to get experience doing X so that I can go work at my dream company doing this job, but I need this current one to get the skill to go interview for there. Now you're in a different situation.
Absolutely.
Right? Because now as a manager or leader, okay, I have a finite time, 2 years for this person. I know how much or how little I'm going to invest into time to teach them and train them. But when you do that and fast forward 2 years and they exit and they go do that plan that they talked about, now they have nothing but good things to say about your company and how well they treated you, how they prepared you for the next step. And now they're going to go recruit their friends to take their spot to work for you.
It gives me great hope for the city of Beaverton that's the mindset of the mayor, because that's super true. The way I got to that same type of answer was, what skills do you want to get better at? What experiences do you want to live through? And what responsibilities do you want to take on? Mm-hmm. Usually those three answers would help me paint the picture, even if they didn't know the name of the job or they didn't have a specific ambition that had a title at X company.
Right.
The right people are pretty tuned in to like, no, I want to get good at this. And this is the type of stuff I love. And this type of stuff I hate living through at work. And this is the type of stuff that I feel like I could take on, but I'm just not quite there yet. You get someone to tell you that, and you get that same data point of like, all right, I know exactly how I can help you grow.
Yep.
We go back to our dynamic of we're bad at identifying when previous success will translate to future success. We're not very good at that.
Right.
As people, like let alone corporations. But if we add the element of let's look at their previous success as an indicator of potential, they're capable of developing skill with repetition and iteration, and they care enough to do so. That's a good positive for them. Now, can we add to it knowing where they want to go next? And if you know those 2 points, that they have the potential to get better at something, and you know exactly where they're internally motivated to go and get, well, I can probably find out if my job's a good fit for that or not. Because a lot of times people would tell me the skill they wanted to get better at as a salesperson was their ability to influence somebody. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's a hell of a reason to go become a salesperson because it's a infinitely transferable skill to wherever you want to go. And if you know that's what you need to get better at for what you want to do in your life, selling is going to be phenomenal and you're going to have a great time learning that skill.
Right.
But conversely, if a person told me, I want to get really good at pricing, I want to get really good at the business strategy of how we should be pricing a particular product, I really think that's interesting. You should maybe be at our company. That's interesting, but you should definitely not be in a sales role because I'm not going to help you necessarily grow in that way. And so I love that your wife discovered that as well. I think that's a huge way of enhancing our ability to figure out who to move on or hire, because knowing where they want to go and knowing if they have the potential of getting places they want to get to, it's a pretty good combination for hiring. Yeah,
and especially in talking about recognize the potential, right? If they have the potential, I think you can train those skills for that next position. But again, if the training doesn't happen, you fall back into that individual contributor role. You know, case in point, one of the pivotal things I learned in this and how important training is I worked in car sales years ago, and I worked at this dealership, sold new and used cars in Arizona, and trying to learn the ropes, right? How to not just do the sale and the sales process, but the administrative side, the paperwork, et cetera. And of course, you always have your sales manager. And I'll never forget this time I had this car. I had sold to this lady. It was coming from Phoenix, about 3 hours away from where we were. And, bought it from a different city. We said, we'll have it on the truck. It'll come. And the sales manager, he told me, he said, listen, we're going to sell this car at nighttime. So make sure you have the buyer come in at night when they do delivery. I said, why night? He said, well, when the truck came in, the car truck was behind this giant gravel truck. And it dropped gravel in the road and it got a bunch of scratches and dents in the car, but they're pretty minor. So if we sell it at night, she won't see it. So as soon as she drives off the lot, it's hers. And I'm like, whoa, I'm not okay with this, right? Like, I'm like my integrity begins, like something's wrong here. And I tried to, I'm like, hey, I don't agree with this. I don't like this. I don't think that we should do this. Why don't we just find another, make, model, color of the same car and just be transparent? And he was adamant, like, no. He's like, if you don't do this, consider yourself fired. And looking back on it, like that, maybe that's what the salesperson would have done, but the manager should not be talking about that. We should have that conversation of, how do we be better? How do we be next level into having that customer trust? But I assume that sales manager didn't have any experience. He was probably just the best salesperson. The other manager probably moved or retired, and they said, well, you got seniority, you're the guy. And that's not a good way to promote people. It has a low hit rate. That's maybe the nicest thing we could say about it, is that it has a pretty low hit rate. So one of the things that that I wanted to pick your brain on in the last couple minutes here, the speed with which technology is evolving creates a lot of opportunities for individuals and organizations and leaders. And it creates a bunch of different pitfalls that are emerging that we don't even necessarily understand yet. Like, what are some of the opportunities you're seeing and excited about with AI and different technologies there? And what are some of the ones that you see as risky or dangerous or to be overly concerned about with what you do? Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it was one of your earlier podcasts I listened to talking about kind of those three areas of AI, right? Whether it's research or writing. I forget the third one. I think it depends on what you're doing. And what I see in like the education world, right? Because I kind of live in that world. There's huge divide of some are on board and it's all about AI and how do we leverage it and do better. But then there's this other side that's like, no, it's the devil. It's cheating. We can't do it. But then you go back to 1972, I think it was, and HP or Texas Instruments comes out with the first scientific calculator. And at the time, teachers were like, blasphemy. You can't use this calculator for math in school. Are you crazy? Now, you need
to. Used to say you're not going to walk around with a calculator in your pocket.
You won't have a calculator in your pocket.
No one saw the iPhone with a calculator.
You will never have a calculator in your pocket. But of course, we have an iPhone because we had calculators to be able to, do that level of math. And of course, you need to know the basics to use a calculator. And it's the same thing with AI and ChatGPT, or pick your flavor of AI. It's like you have to know how to write and spell and put sentences together and all. It's not going to do it for you. So from the school standpoint, I don't think it's cheating. I think it's accelerating. You just raise the bar, like the average or the standard for a written paper now should be so much higher because you have access to more information. But in the workplace, it just makes things so much faster. And I know it's going to eliminate a lot of jobs, but then bring on other jobs. Case in point, I was just talking to somebody at Portland Community College, and they have this truck driving school program. And they're actually trying to pivot and have those students go to more of a AI, cyber, computer networking role with truck driving. I'm like, well, how do those two go together? And they said, we know in the next 10 years, semi-truck driving is going to go automated. It's going to be an AI-based robot driving the truck down the highway because, one, it's cheaper, and two, less likely to crash statistically. So those driving positions are going to go away. However, we're creating this whole new crop of positions of writing the code, fixing the trucks, wirelessly, via a remote app, and all those AI positions that go with it. So I'm excited to see in the future where AI takes us and goes there. But the last piece on this, I think the biggest concern or issue people have is when it comes to writing and like, hey, ChatGPT, write this thing for me. And then it's, a bunch of gobbledygook that's not good. And I think it's just going to get better. And we'll be better at prompts. We'll be better at editing. And through all that process, it will just become the norm. And 5 years from now or 10 years from now, it'll be so natural that people will do all that. And all of a sudden, we'll have elevated what we're doing like the calculator did 40 years ago.
Well, I love your optimism on it. There are some pitfalls and dangers along the way, but that truck driving coding combination is something that 5 years ago, whoever thought of that idea would have been like, or maybe 7-8 years ago, but like, that's a ridiculous idea. Why would that be the case? But I think that's the type of opportunities that will be created, right? Or these hybrid positions, or the recognition that the mechanical action of sitting behind the wheel of the truck was never really what provided the value.
Right.
It was the intimate knowledge of the way in which you could manage a 40,000 pound vehicle going 70 miles an hour for 24 hours. That knowledge and your ability to navigate that and do something meaningful with it is what's important. So I think we're going to restructure a lot of the way we think about value stream that people contribute to society and find that there's a lot more trades. There's a lot more nuanced application to provide value and enhance what we're able to do dramatically because of these technologies. So I love your optimism and I share it. And look, you always got such great perspective. You've created such a cool job. Hey, real quick, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, tell people about what you're doing from speaking standpoint, because that's a really cool opportunity that you're leaning into. And I'd love for people to hear about it.
Yeah. So as I transition to retirement here in a few short years from military, I'm taking everything I've learned from all of my academic research, as well as everything we've talked about in my years of various leadership roles. And my plan going forward is just doing speaking gigs for organizations from the platform, from the stage, to say, hey, let me teach some learning lessons I've learned so you don't have to have the same pitfalls, and help that training piece. Going back to the barista analogy, like let's find a way to tweak your training. You don't have to reorganize everything, but maybe we just add an element of training for that barista that says, okay, you're the shift leader now. Next step up. Maybe we do a 10-hour course on how to deal with that position. And then I want to go in and train companies on how to do that, because it could be something so simple, something as simple as the human aspect of, let's say, for example, you are typing at a keyboard. You're typing something. Your subordinate knocks on your office door. Hey, do you got a minute? And he say, yeah, and you don't even look at them. You keep looking at the screen typing, and you're like, yeah, I'm just finishing this email. But yeah, go ahead and tell me what's up. versus, hey, give me 30 seconds. Hold it right there. Give me 30 seconds. I'm going to wrap this up. I'm going to close my laptop and sit down and look at you in the eye and talk to you. Yeah. And that difference could be the difference of gaining that trust of that person versus not. Now, some people don't need that training and they're naturally just have those people skills to do that. But others, like maybe they need a 30-minute training piece on how to do that and how to connect and use that language to be able to say, I see you, I hear you. And so I want to use all of my experience packaged together to put that together for companies and say, hey, let's talk about that next training level.
I love hearing it. I can't wait to see those programs roll out. Where can people find you if they desire to do so? What are the right places for them to chase you down?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, Ian Beaty, one of the only Ian Beatys in the world, and also at ianbeaty.com. Cool.
Well, I'll make sure and include the links on the show notes. And thanks for joining me. And I appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Erik. Appreciate it.
See ya. Thanks for joining us this week. Don't forget to take a second and subscribe. Maybe even share this episode with somebody it made you think of or someone you think would take some value from it. This show is all about uncovering the brilliance and humanity of high performers. And whether those performers have a massive following or a podcast or a book, or they're a business owner, or they're buried somewhere in a corporation, or maybe they're a nonprofit leader, or they don't necessarily have to have a title. I'm really fascinated by people who are passionate and who are doing interesting things. So if you or somebody you know would be a good guest, don't hesitate to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send me an email at hello@languageofleadership.io to make that connection. I'll see you next week.